Hello and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight in another session of Truth Talks. And happy Arab American Heritage Month. My name is Naila Aladami. I'm proud to serve as a NICET and APSU member, as well as a community engagement team liaison at the Albany International Academy in Albany, New York. I'm originally from Yemen, where I was born and raised before moving to the United States 26 years ago as an international student. For over a decade, I've worked within the City School District of Albany and North Colony, supporting and empowering international students and families. Despite the challenges of navigating language and cultural barriers, I was able to overcome them, and today I strive to be a positive role model for newcomers, immigrants, and international students. I often remind my students and families, I was once in your shoes, and if I could do it, you can do it too. Once again, thank you for being with us tonight. We would like to begin with our land acknowledgement and share a bit of background about Truth Talks. We begin by acknowledging that we meet on the traditional lands served by the first people. We honor America's indigenous people. We learn from all elders, past, present, and emerging. We are called on to share what we learn about the tribal history, culture, and contributions that have been suppressed in telling the story of America. We invite you to think about the spaces you're inhabiting and the indigenous people who came before them and were stewards of the land. Next, I would like to introduce Secretary Treasurer and Chair of the Civil and Human Rights Committee and LGBTQ plus Committee Secretary Treasurer Philippe Abraham. Unfortunately, he couldn't be with us tonight. However, he did send us a video with a message.
Thank you, Nyla. Truth Talks is a dynamic virtual series dedicated to raising historical awareness by amplifying the contributions of diverse communities that have been overlooked in traditional narratives. This program provides educators, students, and community members with accurate, engaging, and empowering historical content that deepens understanding and promotes inclusivity in education. Through discussions with historians, labor leaders, and educators, our sessions will show the deep connections between racial and economic justice, and also highlight how diversity has shaped the fight for inclusivity and human rights. I am honored to welcome you to today's Truth Talks as we recognize and celebrate Arab American History Month. As Secretary Treasurer and the Chair of the Civil and Human Rights Committee, as well as the LGBTQ plus Committee of NICET, I know the importance of ensuring every community's history is valued, respected, and heard. And that includes the powerful legacy and ongoing contributions of Arab Americans across our country, in our state, and within our union. Arab American History Month gives us an opportunity not only to learn, but to affirm our commitment to equity and inclusion. At a time when the Arab community is facing increased discrimination, misinformation, and targeted violence, it's more important than ever that we stand in solidarity, lifting up truth, embracing diversity, and creating spaces where all people feel safe and seen. This month is more than just history. It's about justice. It's about recognizing the educators, labor leaders, and community builders who have shaped and continue to shape our collective future. And it's about pushing back against the silence and erasure that so often obscure these stories. I want to thank each of you for being here today and for committing to the work of learning, understanding, and co-conspiratorship. Together, we are building a fabric from one of our many threads. With that, I'm going to pass it back to Nyla to introduce our guest speaker. Nyla, take it away.
Thank you, Philippe. Next, we're honored to have Dr. Debbie Almontaser as our guest speaker. Dr. Debbie Almontaser is an internationally recognized educator, entrepreneur, speaker, and expert in cross-cultural understanding. She is the author of Leading While Muslim: The Experiences of American Muslim Principles After 9/11, and prominent advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion. As the founder and CEO of Bridging Cultures Group Incorporated, Dr. Muntasser leads a for-profit organization that provides professional development and coaching to companies, nonprofits, universities, and K-12 education professionals. She is also the founding principal of Khalil Gibran International Academy in Brooklyn, New York, and has over 25 years of experience in the New York City public school system as a teacher, trainer, administrator, and diversity advisor. Dr. Almontaser currently serves as a senior advisor to Engage New York Metro and advises New York City elected officials and city agencies on culture and religious diversity. She is also an advisor to New York City Department of Education School Diversity Advisory Group. Additionally, Dr. Almontaser is the board president of the Muslim Community Network at www.mcnny.org. A dynamic leader and speaker, Dr. Almontaser was a featured speaker at the 2016 Democratic National Convention and delivered a Quranic recitation at the 2021 presidential inauguration at Washington National Cathedral. She has been profiled by the New York Times, Time Magazine, Newsweek, and featured in multiple documentaries. Through her work, Dr. Almontaser continues to champion interfaith and cross-cultural understanding on both local and national stages. Dr. Debbie Almontaser, I'll pass it on to you now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nyla. It's such a pleasure to be here, everyone. I want to thank the NYSIT team for inviting me to this wonderful opportunity to recognize and celebrate Arab American Heritage Month. No better time than the present. I'm really excited to be here. So I will share my screen so we can actually get started. Welcome again, everyone. It is such a pleasure. Today's presentation is titled Arab Americans Past and Present, Honoring a Rich Legacy of Culture, Contribution, and Community. Generally, when I do these workshops, I also provide Zoom norms. However, I don't really need to go through all of them with all of you because it's actually pre-recorded and no need for that. But opportunity for those of you who might be watching to see what some Zoom norms are that you can utilize in your own teaching. So a little bit about Bridging Cultures Group, which is the company that I founded in 2016. Bridging Cultures Group specializes in diversity, equity, and inclusion training to undo stereotypes against all groups for professionals and business people, including teachers and other school staff, health professionals, social service workers, law enforcement personnel, and many other groups that really require this work. What is our niche? Our niche is to actually help people better understand Arab, Muslim, African, and South Asian cultures, which are the communities that we work closely with and have a very good understanding of. Bridging Cultures Group also provides translation services that enable school communities to see themselves as a part of a diverse, interdependent world across racial, ethnic, and religious lines. So who makes up Bridging Cultures Group? This is our dynamic team that works with us on a host of projects with schools, with nonprofit organizations, with universities, and a host of other entities. So why are we here today? We are here today for Arab American Heritage Month. Arab American Heritage Month was actually recognized in 2021 by President Biden as a national month to be celebrated and to be recognized. The purpose is to celebrate the rich history, culture, and contributions of Arab Americans. And you'll see why it's so important to do so. Lastly, celebrations include cultural events, educational programs, and community outreach. And we'll be doing some of that as we go through the presentation. So let's start with an introduction. Arab Americans have a rich, complex history in the United States, with roots going back nearly 500 years. Today, approximately 3.7 million Arab Americans live in the US, or closer to 4 million. This number is according to the US Census, which actually was taken in 2020. It is 2025, so obviously the number has actually increased. The community is diverse in religion, culture, and geography. The presentation today aims to shed light on their journey, their contributions, and current challenges. And as you can see here, how we actually in this photo mix both Arab American culture as well as American culture. And these are people from Texas. So let's begin by starting off with, well, who makes up the Arab American community? The Arab American community is actually comprised of countries that actually speak the Arabic language. And these countries are identified as members of the Arab League because the most distinguished piece that makes them all Arab is actually the language. So I want to ask you in the audience, how many countries make up the Arab League? How many do you think consist within the Arab League? And generally, if this wasn't being recorded, I would ask you to drop it in the chat for us to see how many you think there are. But moving along, I'll give you the opportunity to actually see. So this is the Arab League. These are the Arab League flags. And there are actually 22 Arab countries that span the Arabian Peninsula, the Middle East, and then a part of North Africa and spreading forward towards the Indian Ocean. As you can see in the map, we actually have 22 nations that are here. Comoros is all the way in the very bottom. And these are numbered just to give you a sense. And so we also provided the Arab League flags for you to be able to see and understand what countries are a part of the Arab League. So the Arab League has been around for decades. They come together, they have conferences, and they do a whole host of things to support one another, and also to create a positive image of the Arabs as well as Arab Americans. So what are the contributions that have been made by Arabs to American society? Well, first, let's start with mathematics. Algebra is known to come from the Arab world. Astronomy, medicine, architecture, engineering. Think about the beautiful mosaic tiles that you see in mosques, but also the beautiful paintings that you see in cathedrals, and the way the cathedrals will built with their domes and what have you. A lot of that was influenced through Arab architecture and engineering. And then lastly, we also music. Music has played a really significant role in Arab culture and Arab history. So now let's shift gears and talk about Arab American migration to the United States. Many people seem to think that Arab Americans are immigrants to this nation, but I'm proud to say that that's not the case. Actually, the very first person who is Arab and actually came from Arab and African background to arrive into North America from Morocco in 1528 is a man named Zamori, also known as Estembiko. He was the first recorded Arab and North African to actually come to North America. He was a healer, an explorer, and an interpreter. Then when we look further into history, in 1880, Arab Americans coming to America was in 1880 from Greater Syria. Little recorded, was recorded in Ellis Island census. Then we saw another spike of people coming from the Arab world between 1914 through 1918. The first recorded Yemeni was actually enlisted in Yemen in World War I. So yay for me as a Yemeni American. And Naila, I learned today that she's also Yemeni American. So we've had people from our country of origin actually here since 1914. In 1920, the United States unfortunately bans Arabs and Asians from settling in the US. Then in 1924, 13,965 Arab Americans served during World War I. We also saw in 1930, the Great Depression, which actually caused a great exodus for many who came from Yemen. And then in 1939, 15,000 Arab Americans served during World War II. Fast forwarding to 1945, Arab Americans gained US citizenship by fighting in World War II. And then what we saw in 1965, Congress passed the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965. So migration didn't just stop there. But I want to give you just a little more of an overview. So we talked about the first wave, which was from 1880 to 1924. Mostly that was of Christian Arabs from the Levant seeking economic opportunities. Then we had the second wave from 1948 to 1967, which was the post-war immigrants, including Palestinian refugees and political exiles. And then the third wave, post-1967, included Muslims and Christians fleeing wars in Iraq and Lebanon and later in Syria. And of course, we've seen the continued migration of more Arab Americans from different parts of the Arab League. So let's look at the data of where Arab Americans actually live, specifically the demographics. And so according to the Arab American Institute, and the source is actually the 22 US Census Bureau, which basically identified the 12 states and cities that actually have, the largest Arab Americans. So what we see as number one is actually California. A lot of times people think that Michigan is the one that has the largest number. It's not, but Michigan is actually one of the oldest cities where Arab Americans have first migrated to and called as home. So it's number two in terms of the US Census for 2020, followed by New York. Then you have Texas, Florida, Illinois, New Jersey, Ohio, Minnesota, Virginia, Massachusetts, and Pennsylvania. Now, does this mean that there are no Arab Americans in other states across this country? No, that's not what it's saying here. What it's showing here is that these are the cities or states that have the largest number of Arab Americans, but Arab Americans actually live all across the 51 states of the United States. So now let's look at Arab Americans and religion. A lot of times people seem to think that all Arabs are Muslim. And that's not the case. There is a vast diversity of religious backgrounds. So Arab American community reflects significant religious diversity stemming from the Middle East role as the birthplace of the major religions like Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Beyond these shared roots, variations within each religion contribute to the formation of distinct communities and identities, even among those with the same national background. So what we see here is the vast diversity. We have, Coptics, we have the Chaldean, we have Muslims, we have people who actually identify as Arab and Jewish, Druze, we have the Antiochian Orthodox, which is also a form of Christianity, Syrian Orthodox, the Melkite, as well as the Maronites. So really quite diverse. Now let's look to see in terms of the demographic, in terms of numbers. So about 65 to 70% of Arab Americans are Christian. Earlier immigrants were mostly Christian, as I mentioned earlier, while recent ones are largely Muslim. Many follow Eastern Rite churches like the Maronites, the Copts, though some have joined the Roman Catholic churches for convenience. And then we have Muslim Arab Americans. So Islam is a diverse religion with major branches like Sunni and Shia and smaller groups like the Druze. Around 30 to 35% of Arab Americans are Muslim, but many Muslim Americans are from non-Arab or non-immigrant backgrounds. And that's really, really important to note and understand. The largest segment of Muslims in the United States are actually from the African American Muslim background. So really important to note that and understand that because it's the African American Muslims, this is a group that is considered an indigenous group to the United States, where they actually were brought here, unfortunately, in the early parts of the United States. So really important to note that. So what kind of professions did Arab Americans actually have when they first arrived to the United States? So let's look at the historical overview here. You can see these different pictures that we actually were able to get from the Arab American Museum, just to show you. What you see here is actually from Atlantic Avenue, Yemen Cafe, which still till today exists. A family here. You also see here a lot of women that were seamstresses and making clothing. And then you see here many who actually were peddlers on the street. So early immigrants often worked as a pack of peddlers selling goods door to door. This also led to opportunities for them to eventually open their own businesses, specifically grocery stores. And lastly, many found industrial work in cities like Detroit, to Henry Ford's 5-day policy. So working in factories. Now let's look at the professions of today. And this again is based on various data that was provided from the census and other data. So the occupational distribution between Arab American entrepreneurs and their non-Arab counterparts is quite striking. The top 5 occupational categories for both groups are executive/administrative and managerial, professional specialty, sales services, not personal, domestic, or protective, precision repair, and lastly, on average, 90% of Yemeni American professionals own bodegas, delis, corner stores, or wholesale or smoke shops. And so looking at this graph, you could see the different areas that people who are of Arab American actually worked in. So the Arab Americans are in purple, and the total US is actually in a more like burgundy color. So you can see there is a managerial, the sales, the services, the finance, the farming, craft, and labor. Now I have a question for you. I would love for you to answer this question. Who do you think are Arab American in this display? Who do you think are the Arab Americans in this display? If you look at all these people, I'll pause there, but I will most likely, many of you are thinking, oh, the one wearing the hijab, she is Muslim and she's not Arab American. She's actually African American, and that is Ibtihaj Muhammad, who is actually the Olympic winner in fencing. So she's African American. All the rest of the people that you see on this are actually Arab American. This is Khalil Gibran. These are a couple of former elected officials, Danny Thomas, and I'm going to say more about all of these individuals because we're going to be speaking a little more about them. Now, the reason I ask this question is because a lot of times people immediately jump to the conclusion that Arabs are Muslim, and they're not. And that's why this picture really sends that message home that everybody will immediately jump to Ibtihaj's picture because she's wearing a hijab and then think everybody else on here is actually not. So what are common stereotypes and misconceptions? I just talked about the first one, which all Arabs are Muslim. As you can see, many Arab Americans are Christian and of other faiths. A lot of times Arabs are seen as outsiders. Arab Americans have been a part of the US history for centuries. In addition to that, media representation often skews negative, reinforcing harmful tropes about Arabs. You always see them playing villains. You always see them playing the terrorist role. You always see them in some, ominous role that basically makes people afraid of Arabs. In addition, all Arabs have the same culture. That is not true. We just went over earlier that there are 22 Arab nations within the Arab League. And they are spanning on 2 different continents. So obviously they're not going to have the same cultures. They're going to have very different cultures from one another. But the one thing that they do share is that they speak the Arabic language, and that is really the unifier. And then lastly, stereotypes in movies, games, and rhetoric can make bullying seem socially acceptable. And this, for all the educators that are here, it's so critical for you to pay attention to this. So what are some of the challenges that Arab Americans face? Arab Americans, post 9/11 have experienced anti-Arab sentiment and racial profiling. This is not to say that this wasn't the case prior to 9/11. In fact, Jack Shaheen wrote a book and also did a documentary called Real Bad Arabs. And the word real is not R-E-A-L, it's R-E-E-L. And in his book and documentary, he shows that the anti-Arab sentiment and depiction of Arab Americans was negative as far back as the black and white silent movies, where you actually see men on horses swooping up women and riding away with them. So a really great documentary as well as a great book to read. So that has always been there, but it became very heightened post 9/11. In addition to that, there's a huge underrepresentation in government. And I know that we've already have now, a couple who are serving in Congress, but we don't have any, in federal Senate positions. Some cities now have the opportunity to have, assembly members, state Senate, representatives, mayors, but we are still far, far, behind the game in terms of having more representation. In addition to that, media and global events contribute to a hostile climate. Whenever anything happens, sadly, in the Middle East, you see an uptick in hate crimes. In addition, employment discrimination is also huge, especially after September 11th, where a lot of people were discriminated in the workplace, as well as housing in other areas. And lastly, Arab American students often experience bullying. And this bullying, sadly, at times is very subtle, and a lot of educators really don't know or understand what are those things that are being said to Arab American students that are offensive, from tropes, anti-Arab tropes, Islamophobic tropes, to really be able to mitigate them. So now let's talk about how to celebrate Arab American Heritage Month. We, like every other community in the United States that has a Heritage Month, put on a whole host of events that actually promote and celebrate, people's culture, customs, and traditions, through the arts, through dance, through a whole host of ways that you can actually celebrate, the Heritage Month of every and any group. So we believe it's really important to host cultural festivals and potlucks featuring Arab cuisine. When we talk about Arab cuisine, it's not just the hummus and the baba ganoush, but if you tried from the 22 Arab nations, the vast variety of food, you would be astonished to see how very different the Moroccan food is from the food, in Lebanon and Jordan and Palestine and Yemen. Very different and very distinct, and so important to have an open mind and understand the diversity. In addition, invite Arab American speakers to schools and organizations. There are no better messengers of the personal experience of an Arab American than an Arab American personally telling their own story, the story of their family, the story of their community, sharing their aspirations, sharing the challenges that they face growing up as Arab American. So I strongly recommend that you utilize, the families in your school by inviting them and having them share, as well as organize potluck dinners, international cuisine night for Arab Heritage Night. And also invite, singers and dancers from these different countries that can actually put on a huge and beautiful display. In addition to that, use classroom resources that include Arab American stories. There are a lot of organizations out there that can provide you with information. So there's the Arab America Foundation. It has resources on their website. My website, Bridging Cultures Group, also has a lot of resources in the resource section about Arab Americans that you can utilize. There's also the Arab American Anti-Discrimination Committee. They also have tons of curricula that you can utilize. Basically, there is an abundant amount of information, but I caution my fellow educators who are out there, please, 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 when you are searching on the internet, make sure that you are choosing resources that are coming from credible sources. So what are those credible sources, right? We always tell students, do not use Wikipedia. I say to you, you can use Wikipedia, but on the condition, and listen to me carefully, on the condition that you don't use what they put in the description, but you actually use their reference, which is all the way in the bottom of the Wikipedia page, where they actually have articles, journals, and what have you. Go to the direct source and get the information from the direct source versus utilizing what is on the Wikipedia page. Really important. Other places to get accurate information is from universities, right? There are a lot of universities that have Middle Eastern study centers. There's also the Arab American Institute in Washington, D.C. that also has information. There's NAC, there's Access. These are organizations. And then the most important organization that you not only can find resources, but also pictures and exhibits. And that's the National Arab American Museum, which actually is in Dearborn, Michigan. So if you're so inspired to learn about Arab Americans, plan a trip to Dearborn, Michigan. Go to the National Arab American Museum. You will have such a great time, but not only in the museum, you will get the opportunity to have cuisine from all over the world. And I have to say that the best place to have Arab American food is actually in Dearborn, Michigan. And then lastly, I think what's really important is to support Arab American owned businesses. If you live across the state of New York, there are tons of businesses in your local neighborhoods, you know, from small convenience stores that are owned by Yemeni Americans to, you know, a number that are owned by Palestinian Americans, Jordanian Americans, Egyptian Americans. There's now, you know, butcher shops. There's a whole host of businesses there that you can actually, you know, support. So let's now talk about, well, who are notable Arab Americans in science and education? So we decided to actually make sure that we provided you an opportunity to learn about these dynamic people. You have Ilyas James Corey, who's actually a chemist and Nobel Prize winner. You have Krista McAuliffe, who was a teacher and an astronaut who actually died in a ship crash, but celebrated, you know, as an American, as an Arab American. Then you have the legendary Edward Said, who's a, you know, acclaimed professor who is behind the Orientalist theory, who's done a lot of work and research on the Middle East. He's no longer with us, but definitely an icon. And then the Jack Shaheen, who is the media analyst that I talked about earlier, who actually wrote the book Real Bad Arabs. Jack is no longer with us, but his work is extraordinary, and I strongly recommend for people who want to learn more about Arab Americans through the lens that he created through Real Bad Arabs is really amazing. Let's talk about Arab Americans in business and innovation. I'm sure you're very surprised to see Steve Jobs here, right? Steve Jobs is co-founder of Apple. He is of Syrian background. His father was Syrian. And actually, Steve was actually adopted. But his roots and origins are Syrian and really important to uplift and amplify. Then you have Tony Fadell, who helped invent the iPad and the Nest thermometer, thermostat. And then you have Joseph Jacobs, who is the founder of one of the largest construction services firms in the US. Moving along, let's look at notable Arab Americans in politics and activism. The very first senator in the United States is James Abu Rizk, first Arab American senator. James is no longer with us, but he was a force to be reckoned with. I never had the opportunity to meet him in person, but had the opportunity to have a call with him after he wrote me this beautiful letter of support and solidarity after he saw what happened with me and the Khalil Gibran International Academy. So James is very near and dear and so proud of the work that he's done. Then you have Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, who is actually the first Palestinian American woman in Congress. You also have Andre Sayak, who is just across the river from us, an American politician who is the mayor of Paterson. Paterson is one of the largest Arab American cities on this side of the country. So really proud of the work that he's doing. Then you have Ilhan Omar, who is actually an American congressional representative for Minnesota's 5th Congressional District. Both her and Rashida were actually, they started in Congress together. Ilhan is actually from Somalia. Somalia is actually a part of the Arab League, 22 countries, so really important. And then you have Mayor Amir Ghalib, an American politician who is the mayor of Hamtramck, Michigan. He is now actually the ambassador for Kuwait, was just appointed by Donald Trump. So then let's talk about some notable Arab Americans in entertainment. I bet you all know and remember Danny Thomas, the actor, the comedian, and the founder of St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital, which still exists and does incredible, incredible work. My family's personally indebted to St. Jude's. My niece passed away 5 years ago to cancer, and St. Jude's really helped support my family in so many ways. Then you have Maysoon Zayed, who's a Palestinian comedian and also a disability advocate. She's been in tons of movies and has done a lot of amazing things. Then you have Dean Obeidallah, who is a political satirist and a radio host. He actually has his own radio show that comes on daily. He writes for Slate and a whole host of other newspapers, but he's the funniest Arab American that I know with Maysoon. And then you have Mo Amer. How many of you have seen Mo Amer on Netflix? He just had season 2, telling the story of his family. Mo Amer is Palestinian American. He's a stand-up comedian and an actor. And I highly recommend that you check out his Netflix series. And then you have Yasmin Al-Hadi, who's actually Libyan American. She is a dynamic attorney, a speaker, a comedian, a media personality, and does tons of amazing stuff. And she just also has a show on Hulu. So she is in a special called Muslim Matchmaker. So she actually has been helping people who are Muslim get married. And so her Hulu special is a matchmaking show that basically shows how she was matching people. Then you have Rami, who also is another stand-up comedian, actor, screenwriter, producer. He also just had his own show on Hulu about 2 years ago. Definitely check him out. Really amazing. Rami has just done incredible stuff. He was just on the Jon Stewart show last week. Pretty funny. So we've gotten a chance to learn about who Arab Americans are, their contributions, and you know, the who's who within the Arab American community. And I thought for our fellow educators, it's really, really important for us to be able to not only talk about the who's who and give you an understanding of who Arab Americans are, but also to help you understand what the cultural nuances are to be aware of, especially if you have families within your school district, within your school, and you want to better understand how to be culturally competent, how to be culturally sensitive to the families. So we put this slide together, you know, with an additional one. What I do want everybody to understand as you're watching this and as I go through this is this only pertains mostly to Arab Muslim families. But in this slide, some of it is overlapping because it's more cultural and not religious. So, you know, going through it, you know, some Arab families fear challenging authorities at the cost of giving up their rights. This is something that is real. This is something that many people, both Arab Americans who are Christian, and who are Muslim, coming from countries where challenging authorities was just something, not something they didn't do. So really have a difficult time with that. Now, again, I said some, not all, no generalizations here, just some, and it's really important to note that. In addition, I would say that respecting elders is a strong part of Arab culture, whether you're Christian, whether you're Muslim, it's really important to them culturally. And you see a lot of youth deferring to adults and their family. Culturally discussing feelings in a household may not be a common thing. So be mindful of hints or signs that something may be off, and figure out a way to actually troubleshoot and help that young person. Culturally, some Arab youth may have more responsibilities when it comes to taking care of younger siblings, especially if you have families that have, two working parents. Some Arab youth help their parents in the family business and navigate, the American system by providing translation services for their parents. I remember when I first came to the United States, there were days I missed school because my parents needed to go to the doctor or go for, immigration proceedings, and I became, the designated translator in my family. This happens a lot with some Arab families as well, and not only Arab families, but other immigrant families. It's also important to provide extra encouragement and assurance to stay in school. It's so critical, especially for the young men, especially if their families own businesses. A lot of times what we see is the young men think, oh, well, I don't really need to study. Oh, I don't really need to pass because I'm going to take over the family business. No, do not allow them to do that. And I always say to young people, it's great, help your family and the family business, but you owe it to yourself to have an education, because if that business closes, you need a plan B. So really making sure to do that with the young people that you serve. Now, this is really more specific to meeting and greeting Arab Muslim families, really important. I'm now, focusing just specifically on Arab Muslim families. And if there are, Arab Jewish families, some of this may pertain to them because they have similar gender guidelines that they also adhere to. But specifically focusing on Arab Muslim families, it's really, really important to understand what these, cues are, what these, specific guidelines are. So the first one is physical greetings usually take place between members of the same sex. So you must be wondering, okay, well, wait a minute, like, why is he hugging this woman? The reason he may be hugging her is three things. She's either his mother, his sister, or his aunt. That you can do because they are considered almost like your own child, or they're your family. So you can do that. But if it is somebody who is not related to you, then there should really be no physical contact. And so that even pertains to a handshake. And we know that handshakes are common, in our culture, in our American culture. So what I always tell people to do is, look to the cues of the woman or the man who is of Muslim background on what they do. If they put out their hand, then that means they handshake. If they don't put out their hand, that means they don't handshake. And what you can do to actually greet them is put your hand, your right hand, over your heart on the left side, and nod and smile as a way of greeting them. So this is one way that you can actually do it. And this has worked really well for a lot of people who now understand it, especially in a school setting, to be able to shift gears and make sure that you are not making them feel uncomfortable or making yourself, feel awkward So it's really, really important that we are able to do that and really be able to meet the families, where they're at. And then lastly, there is a traditional greeting that Muslims as well as Arab Muslims say, and that's Assalamu alaikum, to which the response is Wa alaikum assalam. If this is something that you feel comfortable to basically say to a family that may be coming to your school, where you're saying it from a place of genuine welcome, feel free to do so. And most likely they will be very happy to see that you even know how to greet them in their own language. I also wanted to make sure to give you the opportunity to learn more about, community-based organizations that not only support the community, but also do advocacy work. I mentioned earlier the Arab American Institute. The Arab American Institute is well over 40 years old. They promote civic engagement. They are in Washington, D.C. They're a national organization that basically support Arab Americans. They actually do a campaign, a Get Out the Vote campaign called Yalla Vote, which means let's go vote. The word Yalla means let's go. Love it. They do it every year to, get the community psyched about going out to vote. There's also the Arab American Foundation, which promotes the Arab heritage and empower Arab Americans. It's another national organization that also, I mentioned earlier, has a lot of great resources, but it also has a Facebook page that has over 600,000 followers where they actually post news about the community. So really a great organization to work with. There's also YAMA, the Yemeni American Merchants Association, which is a Yemeni American organization here in New York City that educates, advocates, and elevates Yemeni Americans. They work with small business owners as well as their families. They provide ESL classes, citizenship classes, youth leadership development, and empowerment to stay in school, and support small businesses and prospering as businesses. Then you have the Arab American Family Support Center, which is also another citywide organization in New York City that provide wraparound services from domestic violence to ACS services and a whole host of services for families. And lastly, Africa, which actually is a platform online that provides a whole host of resources and information that you could look up and utilize to help you plan your Arab American heritage celebrations. And so we're almost at the end, and there's no better way than to end with a call to action. So what is our call to action for this Arab American Heritage Month celebration or presentation? I feel like it's a celebration that we're getting this opportunity to talk about Arab Americans. What we want to make sure to do is see more inclusive curricula and representation. Do diligence in finding, a host of representatives that you can highlight and celebrate with young people in your morning announcements for those that are in schools, highlighting an Arab American and what they've done, fostering understanding through cultural exchanges. I always believe that the classroom, is beyond the four walls. Let's take our students to museums, to theaters, to communities. So find your local Arab American community wherever you are, and take them for that cultural experience. It could be, the Arab church. It could be, the Arab Muslim mosque. It could be a restaurant. Take your students and give them that opportunity to feel the ambiance and understand and learn more about this community. It's important also to support mental health and resilience in the community. As I mentioned earlier, this community has faced a lot of backlash and discrimination in the post 9/11 world. And every time something happens in the Middle East, there's an uptick in hate crimes against Arabs and Muslims. So really, keep your eye on Arab American students and support them with mental health support and resilience. Promote Arab Americans, who have played an essential role in shaping the U.S. I gave you a host of different people that you can highlight. Honor Arab American history contributions and celebrate their presence for a more inclusive future. Attend Arab American events in your community. This month is filled with many events, so look to see what's happening in your local community. And then lastly, shop and eat at Arab American stores, restaurants, and cafes. If you lived in New York City, you would be able to have the opportunity to go to Mo Cafe, to go to Gahwa House, to go to Haraz, and to experience the Yemeni coffee. I'm sure they're going to be opening others across the state of New York, so stay tuned for those cafes. And that's it. Thank you all so much for joining us today. This is our page with our information on how to get a hold of us. And then the last 2 pages are our references. And that is it.
Thank you, Dr. Almontaser, for this great presentation. I've learned a lot from you today. With that, I'll open up the floor for discussion. Thanks again.
You're very welcome.
Okay, Arab Americans have made important contributions to education at all levels. Can you share some examples of influential Arab American educators or movements that have helped shape the American education system?
Absolutely. So I had mentioned Kristen McCullough, who actually is an Arab American. She was a teacher, and then an astronaut and a scientist. So she's definitely one. Then you also have Jack Shaheen, who not only was an academic, but also did a great deal of work in education. And he actually had this, exhibit. It's called Arabs from A to Z. And this exhibit was moving around the country, and he actually had it housed at NYU. And so basically, it provided educational information about Arab Americans. And so these are, 2 distinguished people that I think are really amazing. And then others that you should also know about is Naomi Nye Shahab, who's actually a poet and has written some amazing, incredible poetry and has been recognized for her poetry.
Okay, what unique challenges and opportunities have Arab American educators and students faced in public schools, and how can unions and allies help create more inclusive and supportive learning environments?
Wonderful. I think I've actually explained what the challenges are, but what the opportunities are giving Arab American educators and families the opportunity to present about their culture, about their customs, about their traditions. So opening our school doors for families to feel a part of the school community and share about their community is really, really critical. In addition to that, building a network, and connections with nonprofit organizations that serve these communities to help support and be allies in this work.
Thank you. From your perspective, how have Arab Americans contributed to the broader labor movement, and what lessons can we draw from their involvement in organizing and advocacy efforts?
Wonderful. One person that I did not include in here, and I regret that I didn't, when it comes to organizing, is the incredible Naji Leifala, who's actually a Yemeni American who actually worked closely with Cesar Chavez in California. They were both farm workers, and so they organized the farm workers, and they did a lot of rallies, protests, and a whole host of things to actually fight for the rights of farm workers in California. Sadly, Naji was actually shot by a police officer at a local diner. His death, just shook the entire labor movement within California. And so when they had his funeral procession, his family actually lived in Yemen, and they wanted his body back in Yemen to bury him there. So what Cesar Chavez and all the labor farm workers did was actually they all took turns carrying his casket from the funeral home all the way to the airport versus putting it in a hearse to take it to the airport. And that was like a mile walk. It was the first time in American history that the United States actually was able to see an Islamic burial rite taking place. So he is truly someone that I always share with Yemeni American youth who I work with to help them understand how important it is to organize and mobilize and advocate for their community. He did it for the farm workers that he worked with, and not only just the Yemeni farm workers, but also the Hispanic farm workers. And so this means that when we organize for all of us, and we organize to work on social justice issues that impact all communities.
Okay, Arab American communities are richly diverse, ethnically, religiously, and culturally. How does this diversity enhance our understanding of solidarity and social justice, particularly in union spaces like ours?
I think it's really critical in union spaces to recognize the importance of this diversity because I've highlighted that Arab Americans, come from different continents, have different religions, where they actually, um, can belong a part of the Christian community, a part of the Muslim community, a part of the Jewish community, a part of the Coptic community, but also be a part of being Arab American. So they are multifaceted and connect with so many different communities. I think one of the things that is really important, for unions to do, or the union NYSIT and other unions is to embrace this diversity, which I believe they do. And I want to share that in 2019, the American Federation of Teachers actually put out a resolution on combating Islamophobia. And this resolution talked about ensuring that all, educators who were Muslim and children felt safe and valued and respected. And so, earlier I mentioned that there is this big misnomer that Arabs are all Muslim. That's not the case. But because there are Arab Muslims, it still impacts that community. So I think being able to, think out of the box and do more resolutions such as this, for example, a resolution on Arab American, on anti-Arab American, sentiment, to support Arab Americans would be a really incredible opportunity.
Okay, last question. As we celebrate Arab American Heritage Month, what are some concrete steps educators and union members can take to honor and uplift Arab American voices, not just this month, but year round?
I think year-round, what we can do is, give our students who are of Arab background the opportunity to have a voice, to feel a sense of inclusion, a sense of value and celebration, to be able to be who they are and where they come from, to be able to share in a safe space about their culture, their customs and traditions, inviting parents, to be allies and also educators within our classrooms to uplift and amplify the mosaic diversity of Arab Americans, I think are very, tangible things that we could do that do not require a lot. So if we can start with these things that I just mentioned, and really push ourselves to do more in terms of, embracing this diversity, it'll go a long way.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Almontaser, for this enlightening discussion and informational night. Thank you for sharing this inspiring information. For our folks on the webinar, stay tuned for the upcoming Truth Talk sessions. Our next session would be celebrating Asian American Pacific Islander, Jewish American, and Asian American History Month. In addition to that, we will have a resource toolkit. This and all episodes will be located on the NYSET Social Justice webpage under Truth Talks, with the links to the resources provided by Dr. Almontaser for those interested. We also wanted to encourage others to incorporate these conversations into your work and community spaces. Thank you all for your time, and thank you to our guest speaker, Dr. Almontaser, for this great session. We'll see you again next month. Have a great night, everyone.
All right, goodbye, everyone.